As a Catholic with a YouTube channel, it's kind of a flooded market right now. And I'm kind of lazy to be honest. So I've been thinking, what kind of content do I actually want to focus on? And I haven't really nailed it down, but I do know that I want to talk more with atheists. Um, there are other interesting topics, evolution and all that stuff, but I don't know, it's just been on my mind. And kind of coincidentally, YouTube has been showing me more and more atheist videos lately. In the algorithm. So this guy you see on screen here, he popped up and he had kind of an intriguing title to his video, Humans Invented God, Changed My Mind. I couldn't really pass that up. So I jumped in and had a little back and forth with him. I'll take a look at it. He doesn't do voice chat, unfortunately, it's only text. So I'll narrate my part to make it a little easier to follow along. But I think there's some important things that we can see about atheism and about how to approach people in general in this interaction. So no delay, let's just jump right into it.
Ultimately, on opinion. As such, it can never be truly objective, as all value requires a thinking agent, a subject to
Talking right here, bro.
So all I've done so far is just say hi and establish that we're actually communicating back and forth in the chat. If you're following along, you can see what I'm typing as buzzing the Bema on the right side in that sidebar next to the video there. The first thing I'm going to do is I don't know this guy, so I want to establish what his thought process is, what he actually believes, and how he knows what he knows. So I'm going to ask a couple probing questions, and immediately we're going to see things start kind of going off the rails.
From my personal, subjective moral framework. And I'm not so that morality beam just isn't
lack of
getting through
evidence.
to the cannibals of the world.
Pretty solid reason.
So basically, I just asked him, is he an atheist? And if so, why? And I kind of predicted his answer in the question. I said, is it lack of evidence? So, of course, he says yes. You might notice a problem already here. He is an atheist, but he said it's based on lack of evidence. The problem with that is that, at best, that should bring you to agnosticism. And this is a subtle but important clue that what this person is doing is they're trying to assume this sort of neutral position, as in, they're not really making a claim. They're just not convinced. You see this a lot with the Matt Dillahunty types. It's pretty common in internet atheism. I don't want to get too far into it now because we'll really see it flower fully on later. Just make note of it. In this next section, I'm just going to ask him a really simple question. It's like baby's first philosophy. I'm going to ask him why he thinks anything at all exists. And again, this isn't like a trap or anything. I'm just trying to feel him out and see kind of where he's at and what his thinking is on things.
I don't know.
Completely
Well,
unnatural
that's how I'd answer that question. I don't know.
occurrence.
That answer to me is almost unbelievable. This guy has a video titled Change My Mind. His video has a tagline of debate. And the very first, most basic question that children, it's the first thought that occurs to children when they start thinking about the world deeply. And he doesn't even have an answer to it. But there's a reason he doesn't have an answer to it. And it goes back to his kind of air of neutrality that he's trying to project, where he doesn't have an answer to these deep questions. And if you do, he'll hear him and then he'll just say he's not convinced. It's internet atheism 101. And the point of it is, again, so that he doesn't have to make a positive claim. He doesn't have to defend anything. All he has to do is just say, oh, you have an answer? Well, it's a bad answer, so I guess no one has an answer. All right, so I'm going to try one more time, which is maybe a mistake. It's kind of a waste of time, but I'm going to not make an argument, but I'm going to pose a question about contingency just to see if that kind of shakes anything loose. Basically, why is the universe the way it is and not some other way? Which I think is an interesting question regardless of where you stand. So let's see what his response is.
And to that buzzing, I would also say I don't know.
I'm not going to get on his case for saying I don't know, at least not in itself. There's nothing wrong with not knowing the answer to a question, or at least saying the answer you do have may not actually be the right answer. The issue for me is that he wants to debate people. So what exactly is on offer here from atheism? Come join atheism where we don't have any answers and we also aren't interested in the answers. To me, it's going to start showing signs of what we'll see more of later, that this is basically just a completely closed worldview that's, in a way, not exactly nihilistic, but bordering on solipsistic, meaning it's really only matters what's in your own head. It's not obvious yet, but you'll start to see it. So we go back and forth a little bit. It doesn't really land anywhere, but he ends up asking me what my answer to these questions are. Now, like I said earlier, this might sound like an invitation for him to hear me out and hear my ideas, but the point of this kind of atheism, if you will, is exactly that he's not going to listen. So I want you to notice his answer when I do finally tell him. And basically what I'm going to say is that my answer to the second question is what makes me doubt atheism, because I don't see an answer that's consistent with atheism, essentially. So let's see what his response is.
Why do you think?
Then, the
or
craziest
put it
one
this
of
way.
all, insist.
What do you think the answer to those two questions are, right? I've got an assumption, but I'm not sure what you actually think. Yeah, where was you going with that argument anyway, Buzzing? So you asked me two questions, to which I said I don't know. Where was you going? I don't know. It could be something else too, though, Buzzing. It could be something else.
So notice that sequence of events there. He starts by implying that he has an answer, or at least an assumption, and then he tries to elicit an answer from me. I don't want to say he's feigning interest, but he's asking me as if my answer is going to have any effect on what he thinks, which, as we'll see, it's not going to. So when I offer these three possibilities to explain contingency, I say it's necessity, chance, or intention, which might be better worded as design. His only response is, could be something else. Could be something else. Which kind of implies he never actually had an answer, or he's just not interested in the question. I can't really tell, to be honest with you. But the point of this is when you're speaking with atheists, at least in my experience, they're not really interested, like I said, in what your answer really is. So if they ask, it's not that it's pointless to give an answer in this case, but it's basically not really going to, I guess, like I said, it's not going to have an effect on their own thinking. So in that case, you're gonna see me back up here a little bit, and I'm gonna do what I guess would be called presuppositionalism. I don't like that term because it's oftentimes kind of used as like a confidence strategy, like a way to bully people into submission, which isn't really my intent here, even though it makes for good content. So basically, if you can't read it, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna point out that his video title is a contradiction, because he's saying humans invented God. Well, that argument itself was invented by humans. So if he wants to say that something being a human invention cast out on it, then it's going to cast out on his own argument. Let's see how it goes.
Actualizing its potency to but you also
Well spotted, Buzzard. Yes, this is a conclusion that I came to, and I'm a human, so yeah, I guess. No, see, the thing is, right, for all the thousands of cultures and the thousands of gods that have ever existed, there's never been any like empirical data of the entities that they've described existing, right? And we don't have most of us who purport to be sane anyway, don't have any direct sensory experience of this entity either, do you know? So it's either you're going on the words of other men and their ideas, or apparently you have your own unique experience of the thing, but there's no intersubjective experience of the thing. So there's essentially no proof that any entity we call God exists. That's what I'm saying, right? But you're right to spot that I'm a human making an argument about it. That's correct. I don't have any other frame of reference besides being a human, right?
So basically, he didn't get the point of that critique, which, to be fair, I probably could have pressed him on, but it's hard when you're dealing with limited space and text. But the issue isn't one of subjectivity. The issue is that it's inherently contradictory. To say, hey, I doubt this idea because it's an idea that man came up with, and I know that because of this idea that a man came up with, is, I guess that's called a performative contradiction. But basically, the idea is that you're defeating your own argument without actually realizing it. And I think maybe this kind of highlights the issue that I have with presuppositionalism. Arguably, I just need to get better at it. I don't have a lot of experience. Evidentialism has its flaws, but presuppositionalism also has issues in the sense that it requires a high level of abstract thinking, and it also requires you to be able to reason outside of the box of your own thinking, if that makes sense. You have to step outside of your own worldview to consider alternatives. And if that were possible, you probably wouldn't be a fundamentalist internet atheist in the first place. So I don't know, there's probably an ideal way to perform these things, improvements that could be made to either evidentialism or presuppositionalism. But I think this does highlight that, at least in my hands anyway, both tactics aren't bulletproof. The atheist is going to shoot down any evidence you get them, and there's a pretty good chance they're not going to understand the presuppositionalism you use. So you have to tailor it in the moment, and that's something I just couldn't do here. I would much prefer to have been on voice chat or something if I were able, because I was constantly feeling the pressure of typing fast enough, getting everything I wanted in the amount of characters I had, things like that. So it just didn't pan out. Not to make excuses, I'm also just not good at it, which is totally a fine conclusion too. So we have a little bit more back and forth. I'm skipping over a lot of it, but I kind of bring it back around from this sort of, I don't know, internal critique of his beliefs to make another evidence-based argument. And this finally prompts him to engage a little bit. And we'll see. I guess we'll see how that goes. I'll comment on the other side.
For instance, you use the example of a person having...
I don't follow your reasoning, Buzz, bro. I don't follow your reasoning at all, bro. As long as you acknowledge, like, the standard definition of atheism is the lack of faith or the lack of belief in God or gods. All of the things you said there have nothing to do with atheism, right? Meaning, how the universe comes to be, existence, none of that. Like, you're arguing a theist position, right? And yeah, I just don't see how you arrived at that conclusion, to be fair. Like, the universe could be made... Yeah, but I'm not even going to entertain it, to be honest. But fair enough if that's what you think. No, see, the thing is, you can't... What I'd look at it like this, right? You're not providing evidence of God, right? You have to get to, like, the essential thing. What is God, right? What do you describe as God? You define it. Then you ask yourself, right, where could the idea have come from for the God? Then you look for proofs of that thing actually existing. But what you're doing is making, like, post hoc argumentation to reinforce the belief of the God already. So it's like, it's circular reasoning, because you're starting out thinking there is a God. If there was never an idea like a God or a concept like a God put together in the first place, you wouldn't be working from there, right? You might arrive there in some way, right? But you're obviously working from the idea of God, because you're saying, well, if existence, then God, right? If meaning, then God, but not necessarily, right? Do you get what I'm saying? In few words.
Of being strong, if they choose to take the steps towards building their muscles and getting stronger. That choice and the actions that were taken restricted the potential.
You would
and
likely come
actualized
up
the
with a
reality
God,
of that
right, if you was
person
thinking for
being strong.
yourself, anyways.
So the first thing to notice in this is the completely asinine definition of atheism here. I don't mean to be insulting, but this idea that you can define atheism as a lack of belief it's bordering on completely meaningless. I understand, I guess, the appeal of this is that, okay, I don't have to make a positive claim. I can kind of pretend like my head is just empty of ideas and just waiting to be filled with ideas. And if you could just bring me the right idea, it kind of makes it sound like, on the one hand, you're being fair, but you're also being neutral. But you're really neither of those things. We're not a machine that's just waiting to be programmed. We have a web of beliefs, we have worldviews, we have all sorts of presuppositions we bring in order to evaluate evidence, to even determine what we consider evidence, what kind of arguments we think are valid, which ones we don't think are valid. To say that atheism is just a lack of belief is it's worse than meaningless. It's just a lie. I don't think I've ever met an atheist who just believes nothing, and that's how they arrived at their belief. But eventually, kind of in this part and throughout the rest of our conversation, we've touched on topics like meaning, ultimate meaning, purpose, ethics, and truth. And he basically just says, look, these aren't really a part of atheism. They're not a concern for atheism. And to that, I have to say I agree. It's this kind of atheism, this closed system, very small box, like minimal, I don't really believe anything atheism. It really isn't concerned with these things. There's a reason why, because if you consider these things, then you open yourself up to arguments for God. Now, whether those arguments work or not is another thing, but basically what he and atheists like him are doing is saying, look, just all we got to do in order to be an atheist and not believe in God is just pay a small price. We have to remove the possibility of meaning. We have to remove the possibility of purpose, of ethics, of truth. Even the things I'm saying aren't really true. They're just kind of things in my head that I do. And this is just a huge cost. It's why would you remove so much of what it means to think and to reason and be human just to avoid belief in God? It on the surface of it, and I think truthfully, it just smacks of motivated reasoning. There's really no purpose to cutting yourself off to all these things, except that you just don't like a potential conclusion that you might come to because of them. And so, yeah, atheism really is just a tiny box that has no room for any of this stuff. And that's one of my main arguments against it. I can't think of a more awful worldview than this kind of worldview. He goes on to say that I'm assuming theism in order to argue theism, but he also says he's not going to entertain my argument. So that's kind of a, what's the word I'm looking for? It's basically a contradiction. I mean, if you're not going to entertain what your opponent's saying, if you're not actually going to consider what they're saying, but then you're going to accuse them of making assumptions about their own beliefs, well, that's just a little bit rich. Kind of says things like evidence isn't evidence and arguments are circular. But honestly, these are just excuses. It's pretty obvious that he's built these walls, he's turtled up, and I'm not trying to pin this on all atheists, and I'm not saying it's just him in particular. I'm not trying to make this personal. I think this is very common in internet atheism. It's more about building this kind of castle that you can fling stones from, but try to prevent anything from coming in. You won't step outside of it. You'll only consider things inside of it, and it's just, like I said, it's a closed-off worldview, and I absolutely cannot understand the appeal of it. I wouldn't even really call this atheism, though. Like I said, it's almost more of a fundamentalist mindset. Whether you're a fundamentalist atheist, or I've seen Christians who are like this, it's all kind of the same thinking. There is kind of an odd overlap between some types of Christians and some atheists, actually, that I think is pretty interesting to examine. But anyway, he says about my arguments, the conclusion of my argument says, well, it's possible it was something else. And this is true. It's trivially true, though. That's true of everything. It's possible that life wasn't evolved. It's possible that my mind is playing tricks on me and everything I believe is false. It's possible. Anything's possible. And if we're just going to say, well, we can't come to any conclusions because it's possible it was something else, well, again, this undercuts your entire worldview. You're eliminating the possibility of truth and knowledge altogether. And again, this ties back to what I said, that atheism just doesn't have room for these things, which makes it pretty much a self-defeating proposition. And to clarify, I'm talking specifically about this kind of internet atheism. He says, it isn't the answer to my arguments isn't necessarily the things that I'm concluding. And again, that's true of all arguments. It's true that not all arguments are necessarily true. But again, so what? Does that mean we're just going to give up on all arguments? Really what this is these last two things that I've been talking about are just thought-terminating cliches. It's just a way to say, well, I'm not going to think about these issues. I'm not going to worry about what the answers are, and I'm not really going to concern myself with it. And so I'm not going to listen to what you're saying. That's really what it boils down to. And so after this point, it doesn't really go anywhere. There's more I could highlight, but I think... I don't know. I've been kind of struggling to think about what lessons I might take away from this. I do want to try this again. I think I was trying to be pretty nice up front. I didn't want to put the guy off. He says he's tired, so I didn't push him too hard. I'm going to be honest. I probably, unless it made sense for the conversation, I probably will not go straight to evidentialism, except as a way to prod an argument, a counter argument out of him, because the evidence, for someone like this, obviously it doesn't matter. I don't want to just hit them with presuppositionalism, but I do think it's important to get them to start to question their own assumptions, because if they are self-defeating, if they're contradictory, either they're going to have to acknowledge it, or it's going to be obvious to everyone what they're doing, or at least it should be obvious to everyone what they're doing. I don't know how that'll work, but I think it's worth experimenting with, and I don't know. I think I was a little bit caught off guard by how stubborn this worldview can be, how hard it is to kind of bust through these intellectual barriers that are put up in front of you. But it was still interesting nonetheless. I definitely want to do it again, and hopefully I can learn something useful. Hopefully you did too.